And good afternoon, everyone. I would think that by now everybody's been fed and full, and it falls to me now to keep you all from falling asleep. Oh boy. Anyway, we'll proceed with the last part of this, the last terrible 40 years. And just looking and going forward here on this, whether it's AKA, it's the last terrible 40 years, or otherwise known as the March of the Rainbowed Angel, as per Revelations 10, verse 1, or God's plan with his earth. And we have looked at the questions surrounding that. We looked at the when this will happen, where it is to happen. We've looked at the why, to fill God's earth with his glory, with a people prepared for his name. And that brings us to the who, the players in the arena of the earth, the North and the South nations, the sheep and goat nations, as is otherwise called. We looked at the how, which was in the major part of our last second segment, and we'll continue into the third, is the how. And the final part of it that we'll end up with is what does it mean to us? Probably the most important of all. So we're continuing with the how. And before, this is about where we ended up before we broke for the noon meal. And I just want to just make a comment here about the Valley of Jehoshaphat. And this is a term that's used quite a bit, and it's usually associated with Jerusalem. And I guess some may be wondering, why have we not talked about the Valley of Jehoshaphat, which is quoted in Joel? Number one is it's not mentioned in the last terrible 40 years article. It seems to be comprehended in the Armageddon battle at Bozrah. And number two, there are reasons why it's really not associated with the Kidron Valley. And I understand there may be others that have different opinions on this, and that's fine. It could be one or the other. But I'll give you my reasons why I've not included it. This is the quotation from Joel 3, verse 12. Let the heathen be wakened and come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat. And the first thing we know there, the Jehoshaphat means Yah judges. For there will I sit to judge, or Shaphat, judge all the heathen round about. So it refers in my estimation, not so much to a place, but an event. The event of the veil of divine judgment, or the broad depression of divine judgment. And this could well be Bozrah. We go to the internet and look at the Valley of Jehoshaphat there. It gives the various opinions that have been ventured forth on it. It does make the statement that there's no place known by Israel, by the Israeli chroniclers, as any place around there as a Valley of Jehoshaphat. So it could refer to the Judean desert, it could refer to the Kidron Valley, or it could refer to a symbolic indeterminate place. And it does make the reference that it was the first time that it was applied to the Kidron Valley was by a pilgrim of Bordeaux in the 4th century. And since then has become a general designation of the Kidron Valley between Jerusalem and the Mount of Olives. But as I said, I asked my our Jewish guide on that once, and he just kind of looked at me and says, "You don't really believe that, do you?" So what let's get rid of this screen now. There's another place that's also referring to event more so than to a specific place, or I should say another term, and that is the term Armageddon. And it is typically taken as referring to the valley of Jezreel or Megiddo. It's referred to in Revelation 16:16. He gathered them together into a place called in the Hebrew tongue Armageddon. I'll just take you to a slide that we used in our Eureka study on this subject. And when you take all those terms, Armageddon, what it refers to, just to make a long story short here, it refers to a heap of sheaves in a valley of judgment, Armageddon. And when we talk about valley of judgment, the valley of Jehoshaphat fills a corollary here. It fills a something that is missing on the Armageddon term. Armageddon says the heap of sheaves in the valley of judgment. When we add Yahshaphat to that, it's a heap of sheaves in the valley of Yahweh's judgment. So putting the two together, I believe we have the true meaning there of Armageddon, a heap of sheaves in the valley of Yahweh's judgment. Armageddon, Yahshaphat. In other words, Bozrah, as we look to, and as Brother Reen has referred to in his article there on the last terrible 40 years, the area of Bozrah and in the area of Teman, which is Bozrah is about 25 miles south of the Dead Sea Valley, and Teman is another 30 miles or so south of that. And here's a photo of Bozrah as we saw it when we visited there. And it almost looks like that. That is a post-judgment photo, but it's some of the ruins of the ancient Bozrah. So that just thought I'd bring that forward as my reasons for not including that. It doesn't appear that it is referring to another part of an Armageddon battle taking place in Jerusalem. It appears that that has been done in Bozrah. Christ marches up, as we saw in the slides, and takes over the throne in Jerusalem, marches up the fault line, and becomes enthroned in Jerusalem, and the glory of Yahweh is spread through the land. So that is slide number 16. That's about where we left off. Slide number 17 talks about the completion of the conquering of all lands promised to Abraham from Nile to the Euphrates, the completion of the regenerating and the disciplining of Egypt, Israel, and Assyria. This original entire area of Eden, the Garden of God, is now restored to its former condition of peace and beauty. We know that Eden refers to more than just this little parcel of ground in around the head of the Persian Gulf. It refers to really the whole areas Brother Thomas has often expounded between there and the Mediterranean. This is the portion of the order of events page that we'll be looking at now. We'll be starting on number 18, which talks about the construction of the temple begins, which is the end of the sixth vial, and then the proclamation of the everlasting gospel and so on. So we'll still have these numbers up on the upper left-hand corner of the slide as we progress. This is just a larger photo of our picture of that same page. We're going to be number 18 through number 33 in this next series of slides. Construction of the temple begins. This is a vast and beautiful building that is about to begin to be built in that time. It's called a house of prayer for all nations. Walk about Zion, we're told in Psalm 48. Go all around her, count her towers, mark well her bulwarks, consider her palaces that you may tell it to the generation following. For this is God, our God forever and ever. He will be our guide even to death. Where is it to be built? Ezekiel tells us that in the visions of God brought he me into the land of Israel, set me upon a very high mountain, by which was as the frame of a city on the south. And as Brother Sully has expounded in the Temple of Ezekiel's Prophecy book, this building is to be built on, the center of the building is Mount Zion, the area of Mount Zion. And in this picture, you can see the Mount of Olives off to the right, and Mount Moriah, where the current temple structure is. And that was where, or I should say, where the old temple was and where the Western Wall is today. So it gives you a little bit of an idea as to where the proportions are, how the proportions of this building go. And this is a slide we looked at a little bit earlier, called the slight preparation, topographical changes in the land of Israel that will take place on the as per the great earthquake that will happen in that day. And Zechariah 14 tells us that in his feet shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives, and the Mount of Olives shall cleave in the midst thereof toward the east and toward the west. And there shall be a very great valley, and half of the mountain shall remove toward the north, half of it toward the south. And it shall be in that day that living waters shall go out from Jerusalem, half of them toward the former sea, and half of them toward the hinder sea. All the land shall be turned as a plain from Geba to Rimmon, south of Jerusalem, and it shall be lifted up. We already spoke of a fault line that goes up from the Jordan Valley to Jerusalem, and it appeared that an earthquake would have opened that up for the passage for Christ and the saints to go up to Jerusalem. Whether this is an additional earthquake that happens after that and levels the whole land, or whether it all happens at one time, is another area of speculation. This shows us the site preparation, the holy oblation, the political changes in the land of Israel. The house of prayer is the little square right in the green area, as my cursor is showing you there. And below that is the holy oblation and the city Yahweh Shammah. And the arrow, for anybody that's been to the land and has been on Masada, you can see where Masada sits there. Is just pretty much right at the start of the portion of the Levites. And the other photos on our pictures, illustrations on the side show us where this sits in proportion to the land, the future political organization of it, and then backing out even further brings us to that.
Is it working?
We continue on a guided tour, as it were. Think of ourselves on a guided tour. We see the floor plan of the sanctuary, and we're using a scale here. 1 cubit equals 2 feet, 1 reed equals 12 feet. So the total dimensions are about 6,000 feet wide by 6,000 feet long, a square building. Total area, 36 million square feet. So an effective area for worshipers would be 20 million, approximately, or 20 million square feet. If you take off the area that's allowed for buildings, and just the space would be about 20 million square feet. And that would give a capacity of about 1.25 million worshipers at any given time, based on the frequent visit that everyone shall even go up from year to year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. So the capacity, and we're making some assumptions here, assuming 24 hours duration per worshiper, it would accommodate 1.25 million worshipers per day, or 450 million per year. If that was reduced to about a 3-hour duration per worshiper, it could accommodate 10 million per day, or 3.6 billion per year. So the capacity is certainly there, depending on the duration of the stay and so on. The next part of our guided tour shows the wall. He says it was on the outside of the house, roundabout, and that's that little line we see here that's enclosed in the red oblong circle. Just a line. It's a wall, and it's also illustrated on as number A there on the insert. This is just 12 feet breadth and 12 in height. And we would, to build that wall all around there would calculate it take approximately 11,000 truckloads of concrete, enough to put concrete floors in 10,000 homes or lay 16 miles by 36 foot wide by 1 foot thick concrete highway. Just to build this little wall, this little in the sense that it is totally insignificant relative to the rest of the structure, it just gives us an idea how huge and immense this structure really is. The other four corner courts, what was called the kitchens. This is the place where the priest shall boil the trespass offering and the sin offering, we're told by Ezekiel, and where they shall bake the grain offering. These are the kitchens where the ministers, sorry for that slide taking a little while to come up there. These are the kitchens where the ministers of the temple shall boil the sacrifices of the people. So we have the insert there showing the building. It's 540 feet high by 360 feet square. And there are 5 levels, each level large enough to accommodate 5 football fields. Immense, huge structure. In the next slide, we look at the most holy and the altar of sacrifice. The elevation of the most holy is approximately 600 feet. And on top of that, we see the size of the inner altar. It was called the Lion of God, 144 feet by 144 feet. The size to the outside of that, what they call the smaller court, is 168 by 168 foot square. The size to the outside of the lower court, the other wall, even you see there's really the inner wall, the middle wall, and then the very outer wall, the lower court, is 186 foot square. The total area of the altar would be equivalent to 1.5 football fields. And it's thought and is drawn in here a conveyor to convey the sacrifices up to the top of that altar, because it is, after all, 600 feet high. And then there's a stream of water flowing out from under the altar, we're told, and that goes out and flows out from the sides. And one part flows down to the south, the other stream flows down to the Arabah and flows northward. So that completes our tour of that building that is to be started at this point in time, at the time when all the earth shall be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. So yes, the temple of the construction begins. At about that time, to give everybody equal opportunity and to make the choice to either reject or conform and obey the new king in Israel, there's the proclamation of the everlasting gospel that goes out to all nations. And at the same time, there's the regathering of the 10 tribes beginning. This begins the work of Elijah begins about this time. So it's all taking place around about the same time that the temple begins construction. And the tribes, the remaining people of Israel go out to all the earth, the tribes of Judah, to bring in the lost tribes, those who are scattered, still scattered throughout the nations, and to bring them back. And we see the grinding of the image to powder. The lion and the bear and the leopard have been totally subjugated in the Battle of Armageddon, but the Roman beast remains to be subjugated. So at the time that the gathering in of the people of Israel to the second Exodus, there is this subjugation of the Roman beast that happens, and this happens in the other 30 years. We'll just take a look at our handout on this. So we're down here at the let's see here, Judah rallies, grinding the image. So we're right down here, grinding the image to power. The Roman beast remains. Judah rallies. The armies of Judah moved north to free the Jews in other parts of the world. And then we have the second phase, you might say, of the Armageddon battle, where Rome and the Vatican are destroyed by the earthquake and the volcanic eruption. So, as I said, the three images were ground to powder, as it were, in the first Armageddon battle, but that has now been replaced by the fourth beast. And it is that fourth beast, the Roman beast, that remains to be dealt with. Just give a little time for that slide to come up. Here we go. This speaks of the confederacy of the mother of harlots. It says, so he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness. And I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, Mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. The woman which thou sawest is that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth, city of the beast. The basically comprehending all that we see in red, what was referred to as the city of the beast. So that image is ground to powder, and the lion, the bear, so totally subjected. And what we see is that Judah rallies, an army is formed and prepared by Christ to carry war to the nations, and the armies of Judah move north to free the Jews in other parts of the world. So here we see these where the Jews are scattered and located in the various parts of the world. This is a subjugating of this whole operation is one that subjugates the nations, because there will be a lot of anti-Semitism in all lands, and it will cause an eruption of the battle, and the Jews will become Christ's battle axe and weapons of war to bring all nations into subjection to him. And so when that happens, the nations are subjected, and the second Exodus begins. The Jews are brought back to the crossing of the Red Sea through the second Exodus. And we see that second Exodus happening here. The blue indicating the Jews in the land of Egypt, and then crossing over, brought through much tribulation, and brought up to Jerusalem, to their land, to Eden, the garden of God. There's 30 years of papal resistance to this whole rule of what it regards as Antichrist. And it's interesting. This is from a typical Protestant website. It says, the abomination of desolation is an event or action perpetrated by the future Antichrist. It says, when the Antichrist shall walk into the newly built last days temple of Jerusalem and takes a seat upon the mercy seat inside the Holy of Holies and proclaims to the world that he is God Almighty. This event is probably perpetrated by the future Antichrist at the midpoint of the 7-year covenant which he arranges with Israel, granting Israel permission to rebuild their temple on the Temple Mount. This is the viewpoint of Christendom. And so when that temple begins to be built, guess what they will be thinking? This is the Antichrist. This is the one that we are looking for to build the Temple of Jerusalem. This is the one that has to be put down, fought against. This is the public perception of the Antichrist that will reign at that time. So Judah as Christ's bow and Israel as Christ's battle axe take Europe, Rome, papal, and other leaders. The second phase of the Armageddon battle. And the Rome and Vatican are destroyed by the earthquake and by volcanic eruption. Rome descends into the fiery abyss and the smoke arises. So again, the work of the people of the Jews in destroying that Antichrist, the beast, the Roman beast. Babylon the Great is fallen. The merchants which were made rich by her shall stand afar off for the fear of her torment, weeping and wailing, saying, Alas, alas, that great city that was clothed in fine linen and purple and scarlet and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls. For in 1 hour so great riches is come to naught. And every shipmaster and all the company in ships and sailors and as many as trade by sea stood afar off, and a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and cast it into the sea, saying, Thus with violence shall that great city Babylon be thrown down, and shall be found no more at all. In her was found the blood of prophets and saints and all that were slain upon the earth. So this subdues a good part of the remaining part of the unsubdued world at that time. The remainder of the world, the Islam, Muslim, Hindu, India, China, Japan, China, Africa, etc., are also eventually subdued and converted. The Jews are regathered, settled in their tribal allotments in the land of Israel. The temple has been completed and consecrated. The first Passover is celebrated. The nations begin to go to Jerusalem to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. And the millennium begins as we looked at why, as truly as I live, all the earth shall be filled with the glory of the Lord. Numbers 14:21. That completes the how portion of that. What does it mean to us? It means that time is running out. There is nowhere to hide. It's a few minutes to 12. Certainly the message of the prophets is unequivocal. With one united voice, they warn that we stand before a God of judgment, that our misdeeds will be remembered, and that the Almighty will mercilessly punish the evil and the unfaithful, even as he saves the righteous. Go ahead, the prophets seem to say, do as you wish. But remember this, as you do now, so will your deeds be weighed later. And if you have pandered to your lower self, beware. The Apostle Peter predicted, there shall come in the last times, walking after their own lusts and saying, where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things just continue as they were. Today, this is such a common attitude. Must be so careful not to fall victim to such misleading thinking. Remember, the Bible predictors cried out in the wilderness about the first coming of Christ. Their words should not be shrugged off so thoughtlessly a second time. And if we were ever thinking that, that Christ's coming is delayed, and maybe we've got lots of time yet. I would invite all of you to look at a video. It's called The Social Dilemma. I highly recommend this documentary. It's regarding, in my estimation, it regards the last iteration of the frog-like spirits impacting on democracy and the social fabric of society today. I think everyone needs to see this. It's called The Social Dilemma. And if ever we thought that Christ was not far off, this will certainly enforce that in no small degree. So I thank you all for your attention to this very important and timely subject. And I thank Brother Reen for the article that he wrote in the last year of his life, which has been shared with us.